Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Episode 14, a deeper look into corrections. One thing that I wanted to bring up with you, Brent, is since we've geared this podcast from the beginning toward younger dog trainers, I want to ask you something that I think they could take huge benefit from. So let's say we're talking now to someone like who's listening to the podcast who believes in corrections. Maybe they're a younger dog trainer. Maybe they believe in certain tools. Maybe not. It's all good. But let's say they believe in like e-collars and prong collars and stuff. But they tend to have a hard time sometimes getting an owner on board with understanding why and how these things are effective and helpful. So I like to kind of play that little role play game and just kind of explain a little bit of how I would go about it when someone's like weary of it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it can make or break how the training trajectory looks. So how would you go about getting someone on board who's a little nervous about corrections?
You know, that's a freaking fabulous question, because we run into it all the time. And I think the I wouldn't say the best, but definitely there's many angles there's many angles we can approach this from. For me, it really depends on the type of owner I'm dealing with, right? If I have an owner who is very sensitive, right, to just physical correction in general, sometimes what I like to do is I like to explain to them, the fact that physical correction is a way that we actually get dogs to be present, right? So that's one angle that we can do. So a lot of times dogs are over here obsessing over a squirrel or a bird or something like that. And for so long, the dogs are in their heads. They're thinking about what they could do with that bird when he's in his mouth. But sometimes when we give a physical correction, it brings dogs back to their body. Right. And in essence, it almost makes dogs mindful sometimes of like, oh, hey, I'm here and I'm on a leash. Right. I'm with my owner. Totally forgot. That's crazy. Right. And so that's one angle. It really depends. My approach changes based on the owners that I have, because I really want it to connect with something, a core value that they have, because corrections do have a place in dog training. And my job as an educator is to try to make this make sense for them. There's not an easy answer to that question, but maybe give me your perspective and let's see if I can narrow it down, because there's a lot of stuff going through my head right now.
Yeah. Okay. No problem. And I think that I'm happy to do that, but I think already that was more beneficial than you think it is, because mind you, me and you talk about this all the time, but some people could hear that and be like, whoa, boom, so let me dive in, but real quick, sorry about the barking, guys. We are dog trainers. Occupational hazard, I'm afraid. Please roll with it. It's not a big deal. I think we'll be okay. So I brought this up because I think, anyway, that you and I in particular have always kind of had we have different ways of going about it, but we've both been good at that, getting owners on board. And my way of going about it, let's say I'll stick with the same example. Let's say it's a sensitive person that's like, they just don't want to correct the dog. But they already kind of somewhat understand that the dog may need corrections, at least enough to hear me out, which is typically all I need. And how I'll go about it would be getting them to understand that correcting your dog and stopping them from doing these things and having these misunderstandings of the world and what their job is in this present moment. Let's say they lunge at people on the walk or in the house or whatever the case. It's for their benefit, which sounds crazy, but the thing is, dogs look to us for direction, and a couple things are very clear from the jump. If your dog is lunging and having these issues, number one, your dog has no idea what he's supposed to be doing because he thinks he can protect the house. Number two, your dog is already under a significant amount of emotional stress and pressure, because happy-go-lucky dogs don't lunge and bite. Now, number three, I see where the disconnect is kind of based on 1 and 2. I understand that you're afraid of correcting your dog, and I don't knock you for it. You're a very sweet person. I get that. It's my job as a trainer, though, to and let me throw that in, by the way. Like, whenever I explain this to people, I give them even that to try to help them like understand I'm on your side. It's,
Right.
I don't knock you. This is why people like me have jobs, but I want to do my job and let you know that as the dog's owner, they're saying a lot of, they're speaking in volumes to you. You're just not picking up on it, which is okay. You're doing the right thing either way because you're finding out. So you're not doing wrong by your dog. You just needed a little help is all. And then I'll kind of dive into the whole, listen, these things that your dog is doing are telling me in no uncertain terms that your dog lacks structure, lacks understanding, definitely lacks focus and a sense of calmness and inner peace, like you were talking about, bringing the dog back to the present. I'm a big like horror movie nut, so I love the whole like Friday the 13th. Like your dog kind of makes up stories in their head that aren't really there. Freddy Krueger can only hurt the people in the movies if they are afraid of him. If you're not,
good point.
that's how it works. Even if he's in your dream, if you're not scared, he can't hurt you. So
Right.
dogs kind of make these things real, at which point it starts hurting them, like in an emotional sense. So they lash out, which makes sense in that particular context. But we have to have a deeper understanding and kind of seeing it from that 10,000 foot view of like, look, as your owner, I'm telling you, don't worry about that person at the door. Go lay down and chill out, man. Just hang out. And over time, you can make very real progress with your dog. And that's typically how I'll go about speaking to someone, getting them on board. And it works a huge percentage of the time.
Right. Right. Well, I'm so glad you shared that perspective with me, because then it definitely opened up my mind to a bunch of different other angles that we could approach this from. I think kind of going back to the blocking behaviors example that we gave earlier on in the podcast, the idea of blocking a behavior is like we're helping our dogs make the right decisions. And I think one of the uses of corrections is to help mitigate this idea of like, okay, you have all these options. Let me help you make the right decision. When the dog makes the right decision, now we can reward for those right decisions. So good correction actually means less corrections in the future, and less corrections in the future actually means we can do more positive reinforcement. Right. And so the idea here is it should be a means to an end, right? When we are correcting, especially in the shaping process or the reinforcement process, the better and more consistent we are with the use of corrections, the less we have to do it, which means we've been able to shape a behavior properly. We've been able to, guide the dog to consistent behavior patterns again. And that's ultimately the goal, right? Everyone understands the idea of consequence, both good and bad consequences. The problem is not everyone is comfortable with the practices with our, four-legged animals, right? Like with our, we don't want to cross the line of abuse. We don't want to cross the line of cruelty. We don't want to cross the line of quote unquote being mean, right? You don't have to be mean in order for it to be effective. And that's something that Ian Dunbar says all the time. You don't have to be cruel. You don't have to be harsh to be effective. However, I think one of the big things that has to be done is you have to be insistent, and you need to know what you want. And sometimes our dogs don't know what we want, and it's our job to teach them.
Right. I was going to say that your dog needs to know what you want as well. 100%.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I love that. I think that you adding that definitely adds clarity to your position, and hearing all the rest of it. I get you. And I agree.
Awesome, man. I love it. Well, let's see. What else do we got to talk about, or are we done?
I think we're good, man. I think just the final points that we were going to put on this were just context. Complete context is paramount when you're working with a dog. If you're working with corrections, make sure that you understand context. If you're a younger dog trainer who needs guidance from someone with a little more experience, reach out. If you're an owner rather, who's looking for a trainer or considering doing training, look into a trainer who is competent and completely understands, to a healthy depth, all the ins and outs of corrective training. Because again, like we've talked about, before, even within one particular realm of training, someone's competency within that particular like methodology can make a huge difference.
100%. Other things we want to take a look at, guys, take a look at that 10,000 foot view of what's going on, right? Sometimes it's so easy, especially when we're looking at bad behaviors, that we focus on specific problems, and we look at them as nails that we want to hammer down and like hit the nail right on the head. Well, a lot of times when we're dealing with things that need to be quote unquote corrected, there might be some underlying issues. There might be some preparation work that needs to be done in order to be able to address that underlying issue. And so ultimately, I want you guys to always look at the big picture. What am I correcting for? What is the grand scheme of things? What is the behavior the actual desired behavior that I want? Because just remember, correction is not the answer. Correction is a tool that helps you in discovering the answer. Right. So it's not a fix all by any means. And then also take a look at, different developmental needs. Also, I think dogs, as they get older, they change. When we go from a puppy, we'll go through 4 developmental shifts in 1 year of their life. Right. So, how much correction I use on a 3-week-old or on a 3-month-old puppy versus a 3-year-old puppy or dog, it's very different. Right. And obviously the personality of the dog, the temperament, the circumstance, the behavior that the dog's going through, all of those things vary. But ultimately, just kind of have an open mind about it. Again, for those of you guys who are on either side of the fence when it comes to, whether you're anti-correction or pro-correction, understand that there is always a balance that needs to be achieved in the execution and practice of correction work. That's all. That's what I want to say. Right? Anything else you want to say, Mariano?
No, you did that perfectly, man.
Awesome, man. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for joining us here on episode 14. This is a deeper look into corrections in training. Feel free to please add me and Mariano on Instagram. Mariano is at UNTAMEDDOGCO, which is Untamed Dog CO. And go ahead and add me at CANISBEHAVIor. Make sure you guys check back at our next couple episodes because we're going to be going all over a lot of cool subject matter. Please also leave a comment, reviews, like us, subscribe to this channel, whether you guys are listening to us on YouTube or whether you guys are listening to us on any one of the major platforms, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We're on all of them. So thank you guys so much for just listening. Thank you so much for sharing everything. If you guys have any questions or you guys want us to talk about certain subject matters, please go ahead and email us at dogtrainerspodcast@gmail.com. And we'd be happy to hear from you guys. We would really love to hear your guys' feedback and comments. But yeah, other than that, thank you guys so much for listening. My name is Brent. That guy over there is Mariano Alvarez. Sexy fucking guy. Anyways, you guys have a great night and we will see you guys next week. Peace.